Hello and welcome back. I hope everyone had a good, refreshing break, maybe a little bit of a boogie, and maybe a fantastic conversation on the tables. So we've heard some great themes so far, but one that's come up a couple of times is the idea around stories and around data and reporting. And so I'm really excited for this next session, which is really pushing that frontier. And I think where we want to see social procurement programs that are developed really start to grow into. And so when you cultivate a strong reporting practice, you enable feedback, accountability, learning, storytelling, and so much more. So I'm happy to welcome to the stage Niamh O'Sullivan, who will be our next moderator for this panel discussion. And Niamh, we've got one of my little elements of fun, another prize. So we'll be giving away a Just Potters by Social Canada mug. Just Potters sells beautiful handcrafted ceramic pieces to customers in Vancouver and across North America. And each piece is made with care by people facing barriers to employment, providing both the maker and the end user with the satisfaction of a beautiful piece. And I know we all love our By Social Canada mugs. So if you could please choose a number between 1 and 137.
29.
29. Okay, Philip Streeter, we will be in touch with you with your new mug. Congratulations. Now, welcome, Niamh. I'll let you take it from here for your panel discussion.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. So happy to be hosting this exciting panel today on cultivating a strong reporting practice. I'm just going to wait for all my panelists to join the stage here with me. Yes, we all made it. We're live on stage. Thank you so much. My name is Niamh O'Sullivan. It's an Irish name, so it's spelt not the way it sounds. It's Niamh, like Steve. I am the Community Benefits and Partnerships Manager at By Social Canada. I'd just like to take a moment to say that I'm joining you today from the unceded territories of the Squamish and Lillooet Nations, also known as Whistler in BC in the mountains. I'm really excited to be here today to moderate this panel discussion on cultivating a strong reporting practice. I have a few great champions of social procurement here with me speaking on this panel today. And over the next 40 minutes, they will share insights with us on what these leaders are doing across various parts of Canada. First, we have Kristi Fairholm from Scale Collaborative, who is the project manager for the British Columbia Social Procurement Initiative. We also have Brent Brody, the senior procurement analyst and project lead, joining us from York University in Ontario. And we also have Chase Smith, the manager of procurement transformation at the City of Calgary in Alberta. And now I'm going to hand it over to each of you to give a brief background to all the wonderful work that you do. So Kristi, do you want to lead and start with what you're doing over at BCSBI?
Sure, thanks so much. I'm coming to you from the Algonquin speaking territories, the traditional territories of the Songhees and the Esquimalt Nations here in southern Vancouver Island, also known as Victoria. So thanks so much for having me. I am the project manager of the British Columbia Social Procurement Initiative, as was mentioned, and this is an initiative of small and medium-sized local governments primarily, with some institutional purchasers involved as well, who are creating public sector spends at the community level. And this is a way for us to provide training, education, capacity building, support, as well as pilot project support to smaller organizations and local communities, primarily, again, like rural and remote communities, and to share best practices across the network and initiative. It's been going, we're probably in our third, fourth year of this project, and we're super excited to have launched our impact measurement framework this year. So I'm thrilled to get to talk about it.
Brilliant. Can't wait to dive further into that shortly. Brent, for those of you that aren't familiar with the work that York University is doing, perhaps, Brent, you could give a little bit of insight on the background of everything that's been going on over there.
Sure. Thanks so much, Niamh, and thank you for the opportunity to chat with this wonderful panel and to talk a little bit about some of the activities that are going on at York University. So my position, I'm the senior, as you mentioned earlier, senior procurement analyst and project lead. And part of my role is to really develop what was built through our social procurement policy that I'm sure we'll get into in this conversation. But we're looking at how how what we buy at the university can make a considerable impact, taking seriously the notion that we're an anchor institution and very much a part of our community, and realizing that our activity in the community, what we do isn't neutral. So what we've been trying to do is really build upon conversations we've had with our community to develop that policy, and then develop ways to strengthen and enhance our social procurement offerings, which ultimately leads to what we hope is community economic development. And I'm very excited about talking about some of the initiatives we're doing at York. Thanks.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear more about it. Chase, the City of Calgary has implemented its benefit-driven procurement questionnaire for over a year now. Can you please give a brief synopsis on what that is?
Absolutely, and good afternoon, everyone. So, Chase Smith, Manager of Procurement Transformation for the City of Calgary. And City of Calgary is in the traditional Treaty 7 lands, home to the Blackfoot, the Tsuut'ina, the Eskia Nakota, and the Métis people of Region 3. So with that, procurement transformation, it's a big title, but honestly, it's exactly as it sounds. We're transforming the way the City of Calgary does its traditional procurement. Now that runs the gambit all the way from our social procurement side, or benefit-driven, as we've titled it, all the way to Indigenous procurement, and then some of the bigger spend sectors of the city as well, with category management and strategic sourcing, applying those social procurement factors to the way we actually execute our contracts. So for the past couple of years, we've been working on our benefit-driven procurement pilot, where we developed that questionnaire, we tested it with industry, and we've actually operationalized it now. So that's in effect, and we've got at least one good year of data thus far, and then we've got a little bit of noise in our pilot. But I know we'll go into that a little bit about how you can't be afraid to shake things up and adjust as needed. But we also have a number of other exciting initiatives underway, and I hope before the end of today, I'll be able to drop a couple of hints, and then if anyone wants to connect with me further, I'm always open for a conversation.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. One thing that's really wonderful about this panel, and each of you that are joining me, not only are you all from different parts of Canada, but you encapsulate different types of purchasers. Like City of Calgary is huge, one of the largest cities in the country. And then York University is an anchor institution that has multiple campuses spread out throughout the GTA. And then BCSPI, it started out with remote and rural municipalities, and now it's expanded to crown corporations and anchor institutions. So it's really great to see how this has grown and how it can be done no matter what your purchasing power is. Kristi, perhaps I'll start with you. Could you tell us more about the impact measurement framework that you've developed for BCSPI?
Yeah, absolutely. So BCSPI currently has 35 members. Most of them are local governments and regional districts. And over the last time that we've been working with them as a project, they've done about 400 pilot projects. So there's a certain things that we're able to measure around that, which is, just amount of dollars spent, how many projects are going through, and a bit of the change and transformation process. But we were hearing more from our members of like, well, how do we actually know the impact that our dollars that we're changing, the change of sort of like integrating social outcomes into the dollars we're spending, how do we know the impact of that in our communities? And since, as I mentioned, we have communities that are small, of like 1,500 people in their community, up to Victoria, which is one of our larger ones, 80,000 people in our community. And so we're really trying to look at, well, how instead of everybody trying to figure out their own impact measurement framework, how can we do this together as part of the project? So we looked and partnered with Royal Roads University and thought, let's look at how we can do it at a project level. So across our memberships, how do we measure what's happening? How do we measure what the collective impact of all these people coming together and beginning to do shared best practices and moving that forward in collaboration? How do we also allow it to be measured at a project level? And so what's the impact of those pilots and their social procurement projects? And then how do we align it to the UN Social Development Goals? And so we, as I mentioned, we partnered with Rural Roads, who did the base literature review and the interviews and talked about what were the best practices. And then from there, we developed working groups that helped us guide, if we have this framework and we've created these metrics in this process, how does that land when we actually go to implementation? So we had a working group of procurement folks as well as suppliers, and they really looked at the tools, and we made sure that the data was, and the process was accessible, was easy to gather, was meaningful, and so really dug down on that. And then we swung around to launching our pilot measurement. So we were able to measure a bunch of things prior to launching this impact measurement framework in terms of those broad strokes. But this allows us to have a 3-tool measurement framework that is we can do at project level, that procurement staff can do it at their point where they award contracts. And then the third piece is being able to have a standardized set of key performance indicators that suppliers have helped inform that all across our membership they can use. So again, we're using this standardization yet flexible approach to be able to have it match what the community needs, but also to say, if you're going to ask about employment, this is the metric to use, and then we can also measure across our project. So that's kind of the overarching frame of it. We do have a document that's public access. Feel free to hop on our website that's called Measure What Matters, and that outlines and describes the process of how we got there and some of the underlying principles, and then how it's being implemented in action.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I see that Tori just posted a link to the BCSPI impact report. I think that was published in June, and I highly recommend everyone have a look at that link later on. Thanks so much, Kristi. Brent, so in York's social procurement initiative, there are many ways that you're putting policy into practice. We know that York set construction project deliverables in that there are targets on employment of members from equity deserving groups. There's also some similar targets on construction projects in Vancouver, such as the new St. Paul's Hospital that has triggered the City of Vancouver's Community Benefits Agreement policy. And one common question that we hear from folks is the challenge around gathering sensitive data. How have you been able to navigate this?
Thanks for the question, Eve. It could be summarized as it's been an iterative process, I think, to say the least. But really, what it's based in is involving communication between us and our general contractors, and we really approached it from a win-win perspective. We had project deliverables, as you mentioned, across our projects that spoke to our social procurement policy. But at the same point in time, we needed to make sure we were operating in such a way that we could support our general contractors so they could ultimately be successful in the project as well. So I would say that the key idea in that initial collaboration and discussion about what was feasible and really what wasn't was to look at what data was being collected already, and how we could piggyback on some of that existing reporting already, or mimicking structures in such way. And I think that principle really continues to be drawn back to even when we're looking at our social procurement spend as well. I think social procurement is great, and the reporting, indeed the reporting is great as well, because you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. There's, sometimes these processes are already ongoing. It's just how you can capitalize on that data exchange. So I would say, with respect to your question, it's, the gathering of sensitive data, it's a real challenge, and it's one that we take very seriously, as most of us certainly would, if not all. But how we went about it in this particular instance, and again, we had we tried a few different approaches first, but really what we landed on was looking at how the contractors how they recruited labor or workforce on the project. And so for our projects where we knew that there were likely to be union workers involved, we said, look, if you don't collect that data, chances are one of your interlocutors, whether it's a community organization who's supplying workers to the union halls, or the union halls themselves may be able to help as well. So what we ultimately landed upon, and I think there's room for refinement in the process and future learning as we go along. But what seems to have worked so far is to actually, when we are putting not us, but the general contractor is putting out the request, is to say, part of the successful project delivery that we need to be successful on this project is to have, apprentices, where appropriate, who are from an equity deserving community. And this is what the project owner is requiring of us to be successful. So we've really tried to look at who's in the best position to help collect that data, and then can in turn support the general contractor as well. I think, in terms of how we've gone on, it seems to be working for now. And as I mentioned, there's really a two-pronged approach. Sometimes it's successful making that pitch to the union halls, and other times, the collaboration from community organizations, especially for, where we are. If I could be permitted to give shout outs to community organizations who are, who have been quite helpful for us in the process. Bi-Social is indeed one, but, the Toronto Community Benefits Network as well, and some other, micro community organizations who are really focused on getting equity deserving folks into the trades. So we really, right from the get-go, we realized that we don't have to be alone in this process either. So we've really done our best to make sure that we're doing it at a united front with our community partners as well, and that in turn is has certainly alleviated some concerns that the general contractors would have. But I think there's another part to this question as well. When so that on the one hand, that's actually sourcing the folks who may fit that requirement. But the reporting part, it also opens up additional concerns, especially from our general contractors. And in many respects, that's good. That means they're taking data seriously and what have you. But one challenge that we were initially faced with was, okay, I know I've got apprentices who fit this, this particular from the equity deserving community as it was outlined in the project, but how do I convey that without, upsetting somebody, offending them, or breaking human rights or codes, basically, right? So all of these pressing concerns are in the forefront. So what we did is we said, look, it's actually not important for us at York to know who the individual person is. Like when I walk onto the job site, I don't need to know that apprentice X over here is from the equity deserving community. What's important is that there are reporting structures in place where you as the contractor, and this takes various forms depending on the company involved, but you as the contractor have a way of identifying that individual, and then you can track their hours, because that's something we ask for as part of our KPIs on our projects, to be able to say, basically from a month to month, because that's usually what we do for our reporting on a monthly basis, how many hours they worked that particular month. And what we ended up landing upon was, why don't you come up with a code that's known only to you, and then use that consistent code through the process. And we say right from the outset, like, we will never ask for that individual's name, but it's important that we have enough accountability within the reporting structure itself that that if we needed to verify the number of hours worked by the apprentice who's presented as, let's say, electrician 1 or something like that, we can go back to the general contractor or their payroll or whoever they've assigned to manage that sensitive information to say, could you confirm that this person worked these number of hours? So that at this stage has worked out quite well. I think it's satisfied the concerns of our contractors in protecting sensitive information, and indeed the same process works on the sub-trade level as well. However they handle their payroll and accounting.
It's really great to see that. I know that it's one of the challenges we've seen on the City of Vancouver CBA projects, and definitely anonymizing the data is the way forward. And you've got a higher chance of, getting better reporting that way. But it also requires cultivating creating a new culture within an organization where people feel safe to identify in a certain way. And that's part of the change management. It's part of the whole process. And I guess on the note of change management, we could probably go to Chase Smith. You've learned so much since benefit-driven procurement questionnaire went into practice. And knowing that, you started with a long piloting process. So for those of you that don't know, a year ago, the City of Calgary was actually awarded the Social Procurement Champion Award. And this year, York University is getting the Social Procurement Champion Award. So this is a really great way to see how social procurement, like passing on the torch, is happening. But Chase, if you could speak on how at the beginning of a project you may set targets, but then over time through piloting, you have to adapt and make changes. Is there anything that you'd like to speak on when it comes to adapting the reporting metrics during a project?
You know what? And that is such a great question, because the whole purpose of a pilot is to learn. If you don't learn anything, then you shouldn't have run the pilot. And you can't be afraid of failure. When you fail, that is when you learn the best lessons in life. When something goes wrong, you instantly know it was that went wrong, and I'm not going to make that mistake again. When things go right, you don't always know why it went so well or why it went right. So I've really instilled that with my team of don't be afraid to fail. It's just a faster way for us to learn. And the other thing I really wanted to kind of drive home is we're leading the industry in these practices. If it was easy, it would have already been done. So kind of lean into that difficulty, lean into that challenge, and know that you're in the directionally correct direction. So you know what? Celebrate those wins. Another big thing is the difference between measuring and reporting. And this is something I really try and reinforce. So story time. Back when I was in high school, my physics teacher taught us how to use a ruler. And you would say, well, you know what, in high school, I think you should know how to use a ruler by then. But this was the first lesson. And it was, don't just look at those millimeter graduations. Make your estimate as precise as possible. Look in between the lines. Are you closer to one than the other? And the method, or the method to the madness, was you can always aggregate your data. You can always round off. You can go to a more global structure, but you're never going to be able to make more finite measurements in the past. And then this lesson was really reinforced when on test day, she changed the requirement and said, okay, now give me that extra decimal place. And you instantly knew who had followed direction and who hadn't, who had taken the easy way out. So tying that back to the city's benefit-driven procurement. So we've got our questionnaire. And when we report up to our executives or council or the public, generally that reporting sits at kind of that global level. There's adoption rates, there's values that have been awarded, that sort of information. But when my team's tracking the information, it's down at that granular. It's question by question, procurement by procurement, vendor by vendor, so that we're able to see, hey, is this question resonating? Does this make sense? Or are scores going all over the map on something? It also lets us see where those little, I'll call them good news stories, can come from as well. So when we're able to say, hey, you know what, on this particular question, like the number of suppliers that have their own social procurement practice, we're able to say, hey, you know what, that has increased by 20% year over year. So you're able to pull those out and give them as kind of those little back pocket wins. So that's one of the ways that we've really been able to adapt our reporting while keeping our global reporting intact. We've been able to make those adjustments at that question by question level to really reflect the changes needed from pilot to operation.
I love that, going down to the nitty-bitty details, because you can't, if you don't ask for it at the beginning, how are you going to report on it afterwards? Start with something as small as possible, and then you can like make it big, big, big. I think that ties really well back into BCSPI. Kristi, do you want to share any stories from the impact report? Because this is where social procurement really becomes meaningful.
Yeah, and I think it's part of it is also like the considerations of how we build impact measurement. So I think that piece of engaging, measuring what matters, making sure that it's like it really is meaningful measurement, engaging end users, having flexibility and standardization is really key. Measuring what's collectible. And then what we've really looked at is if you start to measure, what gets measured gets done, right? And those are the things by setting targets and asking for measurement, then actually is a driver for social procurement. And then the really critical part is telling stories. And so we've seen that, across all of our members, sometimes the stories that are magic are the ones that they don't necessarily think about. And so if again, you can go on our website and see different case studies of stories. And one of the ones that just kind of touched me a bit was, from Port Alberni, and they had looked at doing a contract with waste bins. And what the contract had two parts: was the production of waste bins, and then it was the labeling and education part of the waste bins. And they contracted it to an organization that was outside of the community. And the organization delivered the bins, but didn't deliver in the way that the city wanted around the contracting. So it's the ACRD, it's the regional district that did this. And so they didn't deliver around the education piece and the labeling and so on. So the district took that part of the contract back and reached out to the employment service agencies within the community and said, is this something that you guys would be interested in? And they said, yes, this is a great way to give work experience to the folks that we support, to provide income. It was a different way of them engaging with the city to, deliver services. And they did that, and it was very successful. And that created a new model for how the regional district now engages with the nonprofit sector to help deliver. And so that kind of thing came organically. It came from trial and error, just as Chase is saying, like that piloting and trying, realizing it's not quite right. We weren't happy with this, pulling back, retrying again, and then coming out with a beautiful outcome for all of them.
Thanks, Kristi. I love to hear stories like that. Brent, at York University, I know you just launched your dashboard today, and it's great to see quantitative data of the impact that your social procurement initiative has created. But I also remember chatting with you about the qualitative data. Could you share with everyone the story about how you went back and interviewed some of the apprentices that worked on your construction projects, as well as if you want to share your dashboard, we'll put that in the link too.
Sure. Yeah, feel free to put that in the link. So we just launched that today. So have a look there. It's the first stage, and it's really part of our accountability. So much of our social procurement work has been co-created with our community, so we want to make sure we're being accountable to them as well. And we want to share impact and show this is what we're doing. And I'm hopeful as we get further entrenched in this that the numbers will continue to grow. And I think, Neve, to your question, it's one thing to look at the numbers. But when you have the opportunity to look behind the numbers, or what goes into the numbers is what's really drives home the value of social procurement. And it's you mentioned me doing interviews with some of our apprentices. That's probably one of my favorite parts of the job, if I'm being perfectly honest. It's having an opportunity to chat with one of our equity deserving apprentices and just chat with them about life. Like, what is, why are you interested in a career here or in the trades? And, I hear all sorts of things about, their background and, what they're hoping to accomplish. And, I tend to ask questions that really focus on, what are things like now, and what does this opportunity mean for you as well? And, hearing things about, I can't wait to start my own business. I want to be a four-person eventually. So it's great hearing folks have the opportunity and platforms to talk about what their dreams are. And that's great too. But another question I'd like to ask too is just to get, some really firsthand experience about the power of a social procurement program. And on our Markham campus, I was doing a particular set of interviews, and I just said, like, what does it mean that a social procurement program exists? And one of the apprentices just looked at me and said, you know what, like, the confidence that this gives it, I feel like York University is behind me. I just feel like anything that's gone on before, for the most part, like, I know that with institutions like York behind me, I know I can achieve my goals. So I'm cautious about taking too much credit there, but it's wonderful to see that this program can be used as a way to build confidence and ultimately get folks where they want to go in their careers. And really, I think for anybody on the call here, what more could you ask for, really? So that's been a real part of the job I'll be frank, I've treasured, and
I
look forward to.
Love to hear that. Social procurement changing lives. We talk about policy and implementation a lot, but then when you go back and talk to the individual that it affects and how, looking back in their career, they'll say, well, exactly what you told me before, Brent. I know that York University wanted me, and that's going to help me further myself in whatever direction I go next. I'll know that I was worthy and wanted, and that's really incredible. Thank you, Chase. So at the City of Calgary, huge city, would you be able to share some stories? I know that in such a large organization, municipality, it goes to different levels, like from city staff right up to council.
Mhm.
A little bit more on that.
Yeah, so first of all, we're very lucky because we have multiple channels, and those vary all the way from individual project managers having the communications with kind of their supplier base, all the way up to our executives with the mayor and council having conversations with the broader community, and also the news and media. So all of those are available channels to us, which is truly fortunate. But honestly, going from pilot to operations isn't easy. And that's something that we faced. Everyone's in constrained environments. There's finite resources, and we actually had to borrow people. So when we took on all the scoring ourselves and that sort of thing, we had to borrow two buyers from our traditional procurement side to keep this going, because we said there's no going back. There's only going forward on this. But that helped us create that message that, hey, we're invested in this, we're committed to this. And then what really helped us was that those higher ups, from my director to the chief financial officer, mayor and council combined, they saw that social procurement was building towards the society that they want. We're looking at kind of that 100-year vision for what is Calgary going to look like tomorrow. So with that, they're able to support it. And we were also able to do that with our stories. So a little bit more of the tangible. So that's great on the high level, but how do we actually do it? So often we're giving data and reports and that sort of thing, but a practice we always do is include a little paragraph, just a little snippet of what's the story behind the numbers. What's that good news story that everyone can have in their pocket? So when they're talking about social procurement, they can say, hey, you know what, that contributed to apprenticeships. Or, you know what, by executing that contract that way, it allowed them to buy a home because it was a sole proprietor. Like, there's those sorts of things that if we're able to tease them out and give them to the executives, it makes their job of supporting us just so much easier. We also do have our newsroom. So we're able to do a little bit more in-depth, I'll call it journalism, where we're engaging with our suppliers. We're doing interviews just like Brent, and we're able to capture that into actual stories and put it out there for traditional media to pick up. And then they can start reporting on it. And it just starts to magnify those communication channels. So the long and short is we're really fortunate with what we have available to us and the support we've gotten from on high. And my one piece of advice to absolutely everyone is look closely at your communication channels, look at what you can leverage, and don't be afraid to get the message out there.
Thank you so much. We are flying through this. I'm just looking, we have just over 5 minutes left. I'm going to start firing into a couple more questions. Kristi, so, well, we were just talking about City of Calgary, massive municipality, but BCSPI works with small and mid-sized communities. How is the process being built to make it as easy and accessible as possible for purchasers with small teams to report on the impact that they're creating? knowing that capacity for smaller organizations, when there's a smaller team, it can really pile up.
Yeah, so we've created the tools. So when people go to our impact measurement page, we have an annual survey, and when it opens up, there's a link, and we send an email out, and we have somebody who's specific to support each of our procurement champions to fill out the annual survey. We have another piece, and so each of these are, our framework has the guidance. So each document has a technical guidance about how to fill out the surveys. So we've laid it out. This is the question. This is the type of question it is, multiple choice or comment. And then this is the information that we're looking for, so they can refer to that guidance at the same time as they're doing any survey. So we've opened up this annual survey once a year. We have a post-award contract survey. So after they've completed and awarded a contract that incorporated social procurement, that they can answer that. And that's a 7-minute survey. So again, really tight with a link right embedded that they just can go in and it collects. And that's the questions that are similar to, like, what was the quality of the responses that you got? Did the bid that had social sustainable procurement in their responses in there get the contract? So it allows us to look at that. And then the same is with the KPIs. Here's the tool and resource. This is how you send it out with the instructions to your suppliers. Here's how to collect it. And once a year, we will take it and then we will analyze it all and provide that back to you. So we ask them to be collection points, and then we take the heavy lifting in terms of the design, the keeping everything up to date in the collection process, but then also doing the analysis.
That sounds like an incredibly streamlined process, and you've made it as easy as possible in supporting all those individuals. Well done. That's incredible. Chase, now jumping back to the City of Calgary, I guess it's been a year since the piloting process was handed fully over to the City of Calgary staff. How are your staff? How are the team at the city with evaluating the social value weighted questionnaires? Are they comfortable now? I know at the beginning there was definitely a learning process. Would you like to speak on that?
Yeah, so that's a great segue also into what we're looking at in the future, because we are scoring everything ourselves, but we've centralized that. And the reason we centralized was for consistency. And I could probably talk for the next hour just on scoring BDP questionnaires. But the long and short is, you want to be consistent with your responses. You don't want something to be good enough one day and not good enough the next. And it turns into one of our main topics of discussion with industry and debriefs, because industry is interested in this. They want to know what they can be working on outside the procurement window to have a better shot at getting that contract. So they see this as an avenue for success rather than an additional requirement, which is wonderful to see. So the long and short is, we've got a few staff that this is their day in and day out. They are experts in it now. But part of our journey to the future is looking at how can we automate? How can we make decisions a little bit more binary, and then help incorporate it into our systems to relieve some of that capacity so that they can work on more public value initiatives, that sort of thing. So I hope that answers your question.
No, that definitely answers my question. And I also, we created the benefit-driven procurement questionnaire, and we know how time-consuming it is to even fill this out. Does someone have to fill that out every time they respond to a bid, or can they save it somewhere as a template? So then it's like, okay, we did this before. Or if things change over time, like we didn't have a certification 6 months ago, but now we're a living wage employer. How can you change that without going through the process all over again?
And you just described my team's next 6-month work plan. So we're now on SAP Ariba as a platform. So rather than BDP being part of each individual RFX, so they're filling it out, they're submitting as part of the procurement, we want to tie it to the supplier side. So essentially, this is a snapshot of your organization, what you're doing. And then at the time of bid, we're able to go into your questionnaire, pull your score, and apply it going forward. So you can fill it out at any point in time as you progress. If your company moves from small to medium size, because you're having great success in the industry, you can update it there, and then there's not that crunch at proposal closing time. As we all know, the stress is real.
100%. I love that. I love to hear about like reducing barriers for suppliers to make this as streamlined as possible. I can't believe it, but we're kind of running to the end of this now. I'm gonna turn it back to each of you if you want to say one note on what you're looking forward to in the future, given that this is broad horizons for reporting. Kristi, do you want to start?
I'm looking for sharing, sharing and peer connection around how we're measuring impact and being able to tell a really powerful story across Canada about what all this work is leading to. So I'm really looking for hearing that.
Brent, very quickly.
Yep, I'm looking forward to confidence building across the Ontario and the GTA, and working together with institutions and vendors to really make the social procurement space take off.
Awesome. And Chase?
Yeah, so we're looking to focus in. It's kind of that crawl, run, walk. We've got the overall questionnaire. We've got kind of those broad brush strokes. Now we want to go with the artist brush and really get into the details. What's going to make a difference on a per category basis to really take us to that next level?
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. This has been such a delight talking to all of you and hearing about everyone's perspectives and stories and learnings. We're going to wrap up this panel for now. We've got a 10-minute break, and then we're going to go right into the Social Procurement Champion Awards. So thank you so much, everyone.